Discover prototypical track and turnouts with the Roadmaster series from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Proudly made in the United States, Oak Hill's handcrafted turnouts provide unparalleled detail and accuracy, giving your layout museum-quality track work at an affordable price. Whether fully built or in easy-to-assemble kit form, Roadmaster provides all the details of real track. Looking for a custom piece of track work? Oak Hill can help with custom turnouts, diamonds, crossings, and more. Check out all of their offerings on their website, ohrtracksupply.com. Find out how simple and affordable it is to get your model railroad product or service in front of our growing and amazingly engaged audience. Email us at aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. We're going to be talking about the Red River RPM down in Forest Hill, Texas. And joining me to do that, Kevin Leddy. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ray.
Glad to have you here. We're connected to us by Joe Bohannon, who's been on the podcast, a good friend of the podcast. And last time I was down in Texas for a train event, it was the national convention. I don't think I got to run into you then, but it's great that we're able to connect now and talk about yet another awesome train event that goes on in Texas.
Yes, next month we're having our fourth annual Red River RPM. It's something that Jacob Damon and I started really not long after we met. I met him in 2016. We quickly realized that our modeling interests were very similar. And in one of our discussions, we got talking about why isn't there an RPM in Texas or any of the surrounding states? And we kind of shelved that for a little bit, but the more we talked about it, the more we thought, well, if no one else is going to step up and do it, why don't we? Let's give it a try and see how it goes. And, we're still growing. In the 3 years we've had it, we've had a lot of headwinds, including COVID, the economy, just some things that we feel like have kept our attendance from being where we hoped it would be, but we're going to still keep doing it. This year, we're making a big change by having it 2 days instead of one, and that's from feedback from our various vendors. And we just hope to really improve our attendance and make it a special event for model railroaders in the surrounding area.
Let's take a step back before even you and Jacob had that conversation, and let's talk a little bit about you and your role in the hobby. Why don't you tell us how you got involved in even getting with Jacob to even start talking about an RPM?
Well, I've been in the hobby since a kid, since the early 60s. Evidently, my parents noticed that, and it started out with a Tyco train set under the Christmas tree. They were giving me various stuff like the River OC B&O 210-2, the B&O dockside. So there are various things that encouraged me. Whenever we'd visit our grandparents in Columbus, Ohio. They lived a half a block from the Pennsylvania main line to St. Louis. It was a very busy railroad. It was actually also joint with the B&O. So there were just always trains going by that I could just watch from their front window. And so it just grew and grew and grew. In the early 70s, we moved up to Hamilton, Ontario, and I met some friends that had the same interests, and we remain friends to this day. It also gave me an opportunity. In the summer of 77, I worked as a brakeman for the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo Railway, and this is while I was gone to college. And so that just really cemented it. Something else that's going on at that time was the Ontario Rail Association was very active. We had restored Canadian Pacific 440 136 and 10-wheeler 1057 and 7 or 8 heavyweight passenger cars. And so I was really involved in the restoration, including stripping layers of paint down to the mahogany wood and so forth. And so, these are things that just really started adding up. I graduated in 1979 from college and was hired by the Santa Fe Railway, went out to California and continued to meet more people. After 7 years there, got transferred to Kansas City. There I met Chuck Hitchcock and became one of his regular operators on his Argentine division layout, which had a very heavy passenger operation with just about all the Santa Fe trains that ran through there. And yeah, with the switching at Argentine and stuff like that, setting out, picking up cars, I was hooked. Another thing that came along around that time was the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo Historical Society managed to get a hold of station records from the THB Hunter Street station in Hamilton. And what those records have is every car and every train, they're just handwritten notes. The consists were taken for accounting purposes. And I thought, wow, you can build all those trains. And you didn't realize just what kind of passenger trains ran and what their makeup was and so forth. So it just opened up all kinds of possibilities. And I've really focused more on passenger modeling since then. My career continued with the BNSF right after the merger, moved down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Just kind of continued to model and so forth. 2 years before I retired, and this was back in 2016, I met Jacob. And, again, we just started talking, and what he wanted to do with the Rock Island was really exactly what I'm doing. You want to build accurate passenger trains, and ultimately you like to run them as they ran in the right environment. And so his focus was a Twin Star rocket, and as a place to display it, he's building Dallas Union Terminal, which is way more than what you need just to display one train. But these are Fremo modules, and he had been active in the North Texas Fremo, which is now defunct, but he had met a lot of people and is very active in the Fremo world. And a lot of the people that we do setups with are very passenger train focused as well. So that really encouraged him to continue with DFW. And one of the interesting things about that is that through this collaboration, we're finding out that there's a lot of interest in passenger trains. And a lot of the trains that the people had were trains that stopped at Dallas-Fort Worth. And so that continued to grow. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the Fremo portion of it. But I retired at the end of 2018, and I'm glad that I met Jacob because I was really looking for something to do in my retirement years after BNSF. Never thought I'd really get into Fremo, but with no basements in Texas, if you're going to model something, either you belong to a club or you belong to Fremo. And Jacob really opened up the whole world of Fremo to me, and I've enjoyed it ever since. The THB is my first passion as far as modeling passenger trains, but the Santa Fe is my second, and I've got large collections of both, which I've been able to run at our setups, the last one being Elk City. So that's got me to my retirement years, and that's what I want to continue doing.
Well, I can see in your background of being involved with historical societies and your passion for the history of the railroad and why you would be interested in an RPM, because they kind of go hand in hand. The railroad prototype modelers meet. Basically, it becomes a collection of all your people, that same like-minded people within an RPM.
Yes.
In all those travels, you've lived quite a few different places and have traveled quite a bit. Prior to starting an RPM, what's your background in RPMs as far as ones you've attended, or where did this idea of RPM really start to come from?
Well, when I lived up in the Chicago area, that's where I lived before coming down to Texas. I did Naperville a couple times, and that's really where it started. And I really didn't attend any since moving down here, but that thought was always with me, and it really lines up real well with my interest in prototype modeling.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Like I say, we were surprised that there weren't any around there. And what we've heard is that some people tried it. It was just like a one-off. They tried it for a year and didn't work out for whatever reason and just never did it again. We talked about it. We figured that we'd have to grow. We may lose money on it, but we have to be patient with it and really try to figure it out. And one of the things that Jacob did is he went to the St. Louis RPM, and they were very gracious in telling us, well, this is what you need to do this, don't do that, and gave us a lot of pointers to set ours up. And we took that, and it's just one of those things, okay, let's just start working on it. Let's give us 6 months to set one up and see how we do.
Kind of comes as no surprise, doesn't it? It's amazing that inclusiveness and the mentorship aspect of our hobby transcends the models. It surrounds pretty much everything that happens within our hobby, including events and being able to share those events. And I'm sure Lonnie from the St. Louis RPM would just love to see you guys have as much success as they had, and be able to walk you down that path.
Oh yeah, it's really one of the great things about the hobby is the sharing with others and so forth. The social part of it to me is just as important, if not more important, than building the models themselves. I mean, you just learn so much. Everybody, it's just so wide open. Everybody has their own ideas. I just love to see their work, their accomplishments, and so forth. Anybody time if somebody asks me a question, I am always glad to answer them, help them, and so forth. And that is really the relationship that Jacob and I developed. That he actually helped me build my modules, and a lot of other pointers where this is what you don't want to do. And I realized that he's been through the mistakes. There's no point in me repeating them. If he's got advice, I'm following it.
So let's talk about starting the RPM. You guys have this conversation. Hey, this area is obviously missing an RPM, and I've been to Naperville, and you've been to St. Louis, and we've seen this. We know that this would be a great thing for the area. What are some of the early stages? Some of the things that you've had to do to get this thing off the ground?
Well, the first thing was to find a location for it. Lucky for us that the Texas Western Model Railroad Club is just a few blocks from there. And their layout is located in what used to be city offices. I don't know what offices they were, but from that, they developed a really nice relationship with a lady by the name of Venus Whaley. And her dad was a model railroader. So she's very in tune to what we do, very sympathetic and always willing to help us. Very great lady to get to know. So Mike Mackey, who was an NMRA director here locally, he introduced me to her and he helped get this thing set up. And we've had him there ever since. So, I mean, once we got that and once we got the space, we had to start contacting vendors. One of the vendors that Jacob contacted was Spring Creek Hobbies. And they have been, I kind of look at them as our anchor vendor. They've been very supportive. They come down, they take quite a number of tables because they bring a lot of stuff down and it sells very well. So that's a big draw. We have a lot of other local vendors, manufacturers like 3D printing and so forth. They've been very supportive as well. And so we lined up maybe about a dozen vendors for the first time. So with that taken care of, we had to get the word out. Again, the NMRA was very helpful in getting the word out really through most of Texas. We put flyers in hobby shops. One of the recommendations we got was to do a commercial on TV, but that was cost prohibitive. But
yeah.
So that never happened. But still, our first RPM was actually pretty good timing because COVID restrictions were lifted just before that. And a lot of the feedback we got from people attending it was that they were so glad something was open that they can go to. I mean, they were just really looking for something like this. And the other thing that was interesting about that was that they didn't know what to expect. And we just got really good feedback. They thought, hey, this is really cool. We get to meet with the vendors. We've seen some pretty cool models on display and got a lot of encouragement from that just to keep it going.
Yeah, I can remember that, obviously, going through COVID and being told stay home and restricted and all those things. And then when the event started, it was like, yes, get me to it. Right? Let's go. And I'm sure that was a lot for a great advantage for the Red River RPM to be started right ahead of that. Tell us how that first event went.
It went well. It did. We had a few clinics. We had some good raffle prizes, just a lot of good conversation, to actually talk to people that, especially in the world of 3D printing now, there is nothing better than to have the opportunity to come to something like this and talk to people and tell them what you want. And there's a lot of good relationships developed from there and a lot of good products that ended up getting printed. Jacob actually has done a lot of that with his Dallas Union terminal, for example, getting the canopy supports printed. he did the drawings and everything, and had them printed. He's in the process of installing them right now. People will be able to see them when we display it at the RPM. But it's just really something. It's taking the hobby to a whole different level as far as exacting prototype.
Yeah, not only exacting prototype, but it's also keeping the flywheel turning where, say, somebody that was doing some craftsman work got stuck on something, something that was be very difficult to create by scratch. Now you have that, and it doesn't replace craftsman. It just keeps it entices that. It keeps it going, and it's definitely great to see in our hobby. It's definitely, like you said, it is the next level for model railroading for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine out in California who's a Rock Island modeler asked me to build him a Rock Island Business Cars 100 and 101 to Lake Michigan. And the sides and core kit are available from, Union Station Products. And so I went into the project. The one piece that I knew would be a problem were the open platform railings. I made several attempts to try to make them. And finally, someone says, why don't you have them 3D printed? And it's like, I'm hitting myself in the head. Why didn't I think of that? And having them printed here was the difference from whether those cars would have been ever finished or not.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's what I mean about that flywheel. If you couldn't get it done, that flywheel will come to a screeching halt. And you just wonder how many projects never got finished because there was that one piece that was a must have that just couldn't be figured out. And now with 3D printing, it just keeps all that momentum going. So, really great that you included that because that's a huge part of it in the fourth year of this event. And you've nailed it right on the head. You can't stop at one. You got to run a few of them and just try to keep that going and build up on that. So why don't we talk about the fourth annual event and what one could expect there? I know one of the things that's top of your mind and your passion. Let's start with the Fremo modules that are going to be there.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the Lone Star Fremo N group. They are bringing their entire layout down and they want to operate it. They asked us, hey, would you mind if we did operating sessions so people can sign up and run while they're there? And from the feedback, some of the feedback we got, people wanted to see more of that. So that was perfect. I said, that's a non-decision. You've got a green light to do it. So please do. So we're expecting good things with that. We're hoping that'll be a draw in future years. They're always welcome to come and set up. The other thing is Jacob and I talked about, well, what should we display? And what we've tried to do is tie the RPM to a little bit of our Fremo, what we're doing to get people interested in our group. And so I suggested, well, you've done so much with Dallas Union Terminal. Let's display that with some of the trains I've put together or what we have we can put on there. And so he's busy working on the platform canopies in the midway, which was the concourse over them, that at one time how people got to the trains. So he's working on that. Another friend, Bart Helbling, who's our official professional photographer for our Fremo runs, realized what was happening is I need a prop to show that, hey, these trains are stopping at a passenger station for the movie, for the video afterwards. And so he asked Jacob if he can build a mock-up of Dallas Union Terminal. And, he got the green light. And I've known Bart for a long time, and he is a very meticulous, very talented modeler. And what he built, it's like, I keep asking him, are you sure this is just a prop, just a temporary one? It is just fabulous, the detail and effort he put into it. So we'll have that. The display itself will include some of the Dallas passenger trains, and what I want to call it is 12:40 p.m. at Dallas. At that time, the Texas Zephyr was waiting to depart for Denver. It was waiting for the connection from Houston, the Sam Houston Zephyr, and so they pulled up across the platform from each other to exchange passengers. At that same time, Santa Fe Train 116, the Dallas section of the Texas Chief, was waiting to depart. And so it'll be on a track. And we'll have other places where I'll have express refrigerators, mail cars, maybe some sleepers. And also on display, which is kind of the cherry on top, is Jacob built a beautiful model of Dallas Union Terminal SW8 number 8. He had the decals made up for it and everything, and really made it as detailed and as correct as he could. And it just turned out fabulous. So all that, we're hoping to make a good impression as far as prototype modeling goes, Fremo modeling, just overall make it an attractive thing for people to come to our event.
Absolutely. Always good to see that. Really going to be neat to see operations as well with the that N scale Fremo one from Lone Star.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be really neat to see. And then the clinics. Let's talk about clinics.
We're going to have 8 this year, and 2 of them are for my friends from Canada. One, a friend of mine, John Spring, who I've known for a long, long time, he has what I call the most complete TH&B layout probably anywhere. He's going to talk about from prototype to the layout, how he developed it, and a lot of pictures of the layout itself. And you'll get a pretty good overview of what the TH&B was all about in 1954 with their freight operations, passenger operations, and so forth. So I think that'll be really interesting. The other guy coming from Canada is John Brown. He does some very interesting specialty modeling, as I call it. And one of the things he was really interested for his layout operation is the handling of automobile frames. And so he's really researched that and has done a lot of loads with auto frames and everything. So he's going to talk about that. If we need someone else to step in, he has a second presentation on rail fanning in the Chicago area, which, that'll fit. I mean, Chicago is such an interesting area for railroading.
Absolutely.
As a fill-in, you can't go wrong. John Sanderford from Houston is going to talk about other livestock handled by the railroads. And what we're talking about is horses in horse cars and pasture trains, fish in baggage cars, and so forth. Anything other than what was handled in stock cars. So that should be interesting. Those are 3 of the highlights. Mike Mackey arranged for several of these people to come, and I think he did a good job of getting people that had appropriate subjects that would really fit the RPM. So hats off for his efforts.
Absolutely. And I like the number of 8. When you go to an RPM event or even any other type of event and there's too many clinics, it makes you it's disappointing because you feel like you're missing a whole bunch of them. Mm-hmm. But when there's 8, when there's a digestible amount where even if you're only missing a few, you're not missing the vast majority. Mm-hmm. It definitely helps. I really like that idea of just having, and then having really focused clinics, which is really good too.
Well, there won't be any simultaneous clinics, so you won't have to sacrifice one for the other.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, good.
And that also addresses, when we first started, people asked for more clinics. And so going to 2 days will allow us to bring more people in. And luckily, we've done this enough that there's a lot of interest in people doing it. Whereas before, we didn't know anybody. For our first one, we weren't sure what we were going to do. But, again, it was Mike that stepped up for us and helped us out. Oh, one other I'll talk about, Jim Ogden. He's been a regular on presenting Missouri Pacific passenger type clinics, so he's offered to do another one. I don't have his topic yet, but his are always good.
And then you mentioned about vendors. Our good friends at Spring Creek Model Trains will be there. Talk about the vendor area and what we can also expect.
Usually the vendors, most of them are around the perimeter because a lot of them like to have electrical hookup and, to be able to process credit cards and so forth. And so they're in the perimeter. We put the displays in the center. It's all in one big room, so everybody's there. At some point, we're wondering, and we're just going to need more people to help manage it. We may have to move the layouts to a separate room if we continue to grow, but we'll just have to worry about that when the time comes. But right now, we've been able to keep most of the activities in one room where we can manage it, and the clinics are in a separate room, so they have privacy and tables and chairs for people to sit at and watch the presentation undisturbed.
I think that's going to be a good problem for you to have where you're going to expand this event. And boy, I think once 4 years in, you just keep this momentum rolling. I know personally, Dallas Fort Worth is just loaded with some really great modelers, and not too far from there, even in that Oklahoma area, all within traveling distance
Yes.
to the Fort Worth area. You've got a lot going on down there, so it's going to be exciting to see what happens with this show, not only this year but in years to come, because you're a really great spot there too. So,
Mm-hmm.
and speaking of those modelers that are in that area, let's talk about modeler participation, bringing your creation to the event and sharing it. How does that process go?
We keep it very simple. We make sure we have quite a few tables available. If somebody calls up and asks, hey, I want to display models, what do I do? And I says, well, these are the sizes of the table. Give us an approximate idea of how much you need. And that's it. I mean, we make sure we reserve that space for them. We've not used up all our modeling tables yet. And so, we continue to encourage people to come out, but we've just had some really fabulous models that have been brought. Don Watts, who comes up from Temple, he brings a lot of Eastern stuff like Penn Central and everything, which that's where I'm from. So that captures my interest, but it really shows off his talent. I like to show some of the stuff I've done, which is quite a variety. 2 years ago, I displayed the exact consist of the last Santa Fe passenger train to leave Dallas Union Terminal. So I thought that would be local interest. This year, I plan to bring some Katy passenger trains, the Katy Flyer, in its dying years, our version of the Texas Special, which, a mixed bag of passenger cars, and just various other Katy passenger cars that really fit in with our Dallas Union Terminal display.
Awesome stuff. Well, there's going to be a lot to see there at the Red River RPM. Again, that's October 25th and 26th at the Forest Hill Civic Center in Forest Hill, Texas. Give us a little location of where we can find Forest Hill on a map of Texas.
It's off of I-30, pretty much halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth, really closer to the Fort Worth side. It's just 3 blocks off I-30.
6901 Wichita Street, Forest Hill, Texas.
Yep, and that's an exit off I-30, so you get off there and head 3 blocks south, and it'll be on your left. Big white building.
Excellent. And we can find more about the Red River RPM on the website, redriverrpm.org.
Yes.
Very affordable entry fee. 2-day pass is $20. A 1-day pass is $10. 2-day event. Really, really great stuff. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here right on the website, contact information. And if you want to become a vendor, how to do all that and reach out, and everything's right there on the website. Very well done.
Like I say, you can see pictures from prior events, models displayed and so forth.
Yeah, very well done. And this is not the only event that you're excited about. You've got something coming up. It's going to be a little ways away from this event, but one you're pretty excited about. So tell us about this Red River Run that you're a part of.
Yes, this is our Fremo group, and Jacob and I sponsor the Red River Run. We've had it here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We had it in Gainesville. The last one we had, which was January 2023, was in Elk City, Oklahoma, and that's where Jacob was born. That's where his parents live. And we ended up out there out of necessity because it was hard to find space to even rent, and it just got so costly that we just had to think elsewhere. Where could we go? And so he took a trip home, and in the middle of when we were looking for space, and he knew the director of the Civic Center. So we went and talked to her, and, the rest is history. We, just immediately signed a lease, sent him a check, says, we're doing it. It is 22,000 square feet, which was just awesome. And that turned out to be a stroke of luck because we had so many modelers that were interested in bringing their modules everywhere from California to Minnesota, Oklahoma, Missouri, one from Ohio, of course, Texas, Kansas, Colorado. We had, I believe the count was 110 modules. We had 40 participants, and we did a good job filling up the place. There's room for more, but it was the equivalent. The mainline trackage, we measured it, and it scaled out to 11 miles of mainline.
Wow.
With the subdivision branches and so forth. Dallas Union Terminal is the keystone, which the layout was built from. And we had a northern division, southern division, and a western division, and put together a timetable for that. And we intended to have passenger operations, but did not because Dallas Union Terminal wasn't quite ready. But we did have some structured freight operations, including trains running under dispatcher control. So the neat thing about it is that besides having some very talented modelers who've done some great modules, and for Jacob and I in particular have brought some really nice passenger trains, is that there's a growing interest in trying to do more structured operations. So in May of 2025, when we do it again, that's where we plan to do our first operation of Dallas Union Terminal. Really looking forward to that. Jacob asked me to set it up, and I've given it a lot of thought. And what I found is that, these guys have run trains before, but so many people are unfamiliar with what really went on in passenger train operations and terminals, is that we pretty much have to guide them. So I told Jacob I would be station master. Dallas Union Terminal is controlled by all the switches are remote controlled. So we're going to have my friend Ed Chapman, who's also retired BNSF. He's going to be the tower operator. And I have two other guys in mind that will do the terminal switching. So passenger operations is really more the terminal operations, not so much out on the line. So really all they have to do is bring the train in, maybe cut off their power if they have to work. If there's some work to do, we'll handle cutting out cars, cutting in cars. They put their power back on, and when they're ready, they go. It's something that really doesn't put any pressure on them. And two things: I want them to enjoy it and have fun with it, and get a taste of it that they'll want to do it more. And maybe we can expand on these operations because, we also have Rob Petty's Wichita terminal that we can expand it to. We've had another one called Burlington, which is more of a run-through station. We can do something with that. And we hope to have a couple more in future setups.
Well, that's great. It sounds like a great event if you're into passenger operations, or if you want to learn more about passenger operations. It's something you could definitely get something out of. Why don't you tell us when's the date of this event?
The date of this event will be starting May 15th and run through May 18th, 2025.
And where is that going to be?
Elk City, Oklahoma. Elk City is on I-40, just a little over an hour west of Oklahoma City. So it's fairly easy to get to.
Well, that's awesome. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of logistics that goes into putting modules like that together with 40 participants over, you said, I think 110 modules. It's an amazing number. And I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of planning that goes into that. And I can completely understand wanting to make sure everything runs smoothly.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into it. Jacob set up in Groups IO. We have a list of people that participate. We have a list of the modules. We have the module diagrams. We have other characteristics of whether single track, double track, is it signaled, non-signaled, and so forth. And one of our participants, AJ Murphy, took all this information and he sat down and laid all that out in a computer and, sent it out to us, and we looked at it and did some critiquing and everything. But it turned out to be a very, very great setup. Everybody thoroughly enjoyed it, and we had few problems with it.
Well, I'd say between the Red River RPM and this Fremo event up in Elk City, Oklahoma, and then your own personal hobbies and your own involvement, your retirement's going to stay pretty busy here, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I just think back and it's like, how did I ever have a full-time job? It's just like, how did I ever have time for that?
Right.
Yeah, especially in the railroad industry where you work a lot of long hours, but, just kind of make it work, and you get a moment, try to spend it with the hobby.
Absolutely. Well, you'll be spending a lot of time with the hobby with all this going on, and appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us. If you're wanting to attend either event, especially the Red River RPM, the link is redriverrpm.org. You can find all of the links regarding today's show on our website, aroundthelayout.com/124. Again, Kevin, thank you for coming on Around the Layout and telling us about the Red River RPM and your Fremo event up in Elk City, Oklahoma.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.